Hello, this is Mish, and welcome to another Strain review. So this one is for Season 3, Episode 5. The episode is called Madness. So before I get started, if you haven't watched the episode yet, go and watch it, as this will contain many spoilers. So let's get into it. So as usual, I will cover the characters and what's happening with them and their story arcs, as I think it's better to do it this way than just kind of going by a timeline of the episode. So the introduction for the episode was, an update that 7 days has passed since the last episode, and it's now gone worldwide. It's confirmed. It's all over Europe. It's all over the Americas. It's everywhere. So things aren't looking good. But let us move on to the first characters we saw, which was Ephraim and Dutch, and their first lines, which they spoke, kind of counter the whole introduction. So the introduction looks pretty dire. So we're saying the world is worldwide now, but then the first line, it was Dutch saying they were playing chess in the park, and Dutch said, "No need to take the next turn. You've already lost." And Ephraim kind of responds saying, "That's bull. There's no way." And goes anyway. And that to me is, I guess, the point of, whilst things do look dire in the season, there is some positives coming out here. So yeah, let's talk about Ephraim and Dutch and what they did this episode. So yeah, as I said, playing chess in the park, and that was really a ploy to capture some Strigoi. So what they're doing is they say they've gone back to basics, working on the Strigoi anatomy, trying to figure out ways to defeat them, because the previous weapons have all been rendered useless. So, and accidentally they came across something new, which when Dutch turned on the microwave, Ephraim noted that the worms inside the brain, because he actually completely dissected them, and he had a brain sitting there on the bench, and you can see inside the brain, I guess the brain is completely redundant, and inside there's a little ball of worms, which is really the core to the Strigoi. When Dutch turned on the microwave, they went nuts. So they thought, okay, let's make a microwave weapon of sorts and see if we can cut the line of communication between them, because if the worms are going, being distorted, maybe they can't communicate, because there's a hive mind with the Strigoi, and that's what they tried, and they failed. So they made a weapon. It kind of worked, so they tested it on a proper subject by releasing a subject, and they nearly died. So yeah, bit of a failure there, but it was good to see that they are going back to basics and trying to find a weapon to defeat them. But anyway, and after that they hit the booze again, so that's not good. But anyway, that was pretty much in a nutshell what they did. So let's move on to Vasily and Justine. Whilst these two don't, spend too much time together on the episode, it really is, centric around what they're doing. So you see Justine and the police captain attending a site which is in a safe zone, and the Strigoi have broken through and killed a whole lot of people. And they're kind of saying, well, how is this happening? I thought this was safe. Then I guess that ties in with what Vasily Fet's doing. So he actually has put some GPS trackers on some Strigoi, and he's trying to, get a location of their main nest. And he does that. He follows them down. He finds a tunnel, and then follows them down to the tunnel. Interesting scene in there as well, where he encounters some builders, all dressed in their building gear. They're working on a tunnel with machinery, and they turn out to be Strigoi. So that's strange, because they're obviously intelligent Strigoi doing a job, and they look like they've been turned for a while, because they're heavily along their Strigoi transformation or mutation, but yet they're still working on machinery. So that's interesting. I guess it ties in with the whole the Master controlling the Navy SEALs a few episodes ago, and there's a bit more as well later. I guess there was the issue with when Ephraim and Dutch were testing their weapon. The Strigoi was clever enough to grab a key and open the door, and that kind of that blew them away. They didn't understand. So there's an intelligence growing with the Strigoi. But anyway, I'll talk about that in a minute. So yeah, Vasily Fet, he's down in the tunnels. He finds the nest, and it's massive, and it's right in Central Park. So he's noted where it is, and he's going back to tell Justine, Feraldo, and the police chief, this is where it is. It's massive. We need to take this one out. This is the central nest. Okay, and then on to Palmer and Eichhorst. Not a lot from these guys, but very big a lot of information in a very small amount of time. So we see that Palmer's, physical health is degraded even more. He really needs the white from the master. Eichhorst visits him with a new associate. So that new associate was Sanjay Dasad. And we don't know what that new associate is, why he's there. My interpretation would be that Eichhorst and the master have lost faith in Palmer doing that job, so they're trying to slowly replace him with another very wealthy businessman. So that will be what... But it's interesting to see that because, that's going to cause an issue with Palmer, right? So that'll be interesting to see where that goes. But the other thing, there's a boat coming from Egypt. Now, we don't know what that's carrying, but it's going to be very important. If you look on IMDb in the next few episodes, that's a point that's mentioned in there a few times. If you don't want to know what's going to go on, because those episode descriptions are quite detailed, which is quite impressive, but I looked and there is a lot of boat information going on in the future about this boat from Egypt. So it's going to play a big part, and what is on that boat. Interesting. I'll get into that a bit later as well. But that's pretty much what happened with Palmer and Eichhorst. There's a little more stuff from Palmer with Strachian, but I'll get into that in a minute. So then on to, I guess, probably the main story arc in this episode, which was Quinlan and Strachian. So this was very intriguing. I found it very interesting. Good character development. I guess an interesting character development. You saw another side to Strachian I didn't know existed. So Mr. Quinlan kind of jabs at Strachian when they're going over the lumen, as they do, and he finds a line. Now, he keeps seeing this repetitive thing about the hunters of the Strigoi. They always seem to work alone, and they always seem to almost go crazy. And he kind of jabbed at Strachian, saying, look, this is what you guys turn into. And he jabbed back, saying, this is what you've turned into as well. But that jab really set off these flashbacks for Strachian. So we did many flashbacks back to 1972. And Strachian is, I guess, on the path of the Lumen and Eichhorst and the Master back then. So what he's done, he's set up a bit of a trap. So he says he has the Lumen and he's trying to sell it. So he's working with a brothel and he's saying, I've got a buyer. I've got the Lumen. You need to find me a buyer. And the brothel owner finds him the buyer. He thinks it's Eichhorst. So he meets up with the buyer, and it's not Eichhorst. It's Dr. Draverhaven. So if you don't remember, he's from a few seasons ago. He owned I think it was a pawn shop, and he's bought the sword, the walking stick sword from him, and then there was a bit of a chase and he lost him. So he goes in there, has a meeting with him, and eventually, he finds out that he knew, that the doctor knew that it was Strachian, and then they have a fight, and Strachian wins, and that's when things turn pretty dark, really. So Strachian dismembers him, but keeps him alive, chucks him in a suitcase, and chucks him over a boat. And that was, I guess, the part which the flashback was you meant to see that part, because the whole concept of putting the Strigoi in a box and then getting rid of them it's a parallel to what they find in the book. So with that in Strachian's mind, he remembers that situation, and then he thinks about the Lumen, and I guess they take the book outside. Obviously, Quinlan doesn't go outside; it's a bit too bright. But Strachian lifts up the page and sees that more information in there, and it says you need to put the Strigoi Master, the Crimson Worm, in a box surrounded by lead and silver, and then dispose of the box somewhere. And that's really how they're going to beat the Master. So that was interesting how that really tied in there with a side of Strachian you didn't know existed, a real evil dark side. When he did that, dismembered Dr. Dravenhaven, even though Dravenhaven deserved that, it's still, a good character like Satrakian doing something like that. Doing something like that is really out of character. And that's the whole point of the episode as well. The episode is called Madness. So that's the correlation with that episode title. So now Satrakian and Quinlan know how to defeat the Master. They have to find him and come up with a plan. But the first thing they need to do is really figure out who the Master is now. So that's when he reaches out for Palmer, and they make a deal, they make a pact, because Palmer is in a wheelchair at this point. He's not looking good. He's probably not got more than a few days left in him. And Satrakian says, he's not going to give him the recipe for the white, but he will supply him with some of the white to keep him going. So they make a deal where Palmer will try and get the Master's new identity and possibly even his location. But then there's an interesting part there as well, which ties in with the scene with Palmer before, about how you kind of thought that Icorst is replacing him. That Satrakian mentions that you didn't know that Bolivar was destroyed, so he's lost faith in you. And whilst Palmer admits he still says that he still has stuff. He's still of value to the Master, and he will be able to get this information. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But yeah, that was, I guess, the episode in a nutshell, all the different story arcs. So my final thoughts, it was a good episode. There was a lot of progress in many places. I guess the progress of finding that big nest, that's probably the main nest of the whole New York City. So if they take that out, that'll be a massive victory for them. Even though they took out Bolivar, you saw the worm escape, so ultimately that was just a bit of a back step. But now that Quinlan and Satrakian have figured out a way to defeat the Master, once again, that's a massive step forward. They've just got to come up with a plan and implement it. But yeah, a few things going on here that I want to mention as well. Yeah, the Strigoi getting more intelligent. We've seen it quite a few times. For the most part of the whole 3 seasons, the Strigoi have just been, I guess, drones. They're mindless eating machines. But now we've seen it in the last few episodes. We've had Navy SEAL Strigoi, and we've had the Builder Strigoi, and the Strigoi that just seemed to be a mindless drone Strigoi, but trying to, he gets a key and opens a lock. Never have we seen that before. So interesting how they are getting smarter. I mean, we know that the Master has the ability to make exceptions like Icorst and Dr. Draverhaven and Kelly as well. They're all exceptions. They're very smart. They're almost themselves under the Master's control. But yeah, interesting to see how the average drone is evolving as well. And that ties in as well with the fact that they're now, I guess, evolving past the point, the mutation of Ephraim's weapons are no longer working on them. So that ties in with that. So what is on the boat that's coming from Egypt? I think that's going to be a big point. And as well, something which was mentioned was by Quinlan around when they're reading the Lumen about the 7 ancients. So I guess we've got confirmation there. There's 7 ancients worldwide, and some of them are unaccounted for. So maybe there's one of the ancients on a boat. We don't know. Could be something like that, right? Or maybe it's a whole bunch more Strigoi. But we'll see. But yeah, interesting about that point where, they're saying ancients and then something's coming from Egypt. I kind of think it might be an ancient coming across. Maybe an ancient which is siding with the Master, so there may be 2 Masters. That will be pretty devastating if it was. So maybe they'll defeat one and have another one to deal with. So yeah, Strigoi more intelligent. What's on that boat? Another point that I want to mention is, what is Ephraim and Dutch going to do? Whilst I really like to see those characters progressing, I guess going back to basics, trying to figure out a weapon, I mean, ultimately, are they going to manage to do anything, or is it just going to be a bit of a sideshow going forward? I do like those characters. Sometimes I think Dutch's acting in the previous seasons, I didn't like it. Season 3, I think it's a lot better. But going forward, not sure what those characters are really going to offer. I think it's more about who is the Master now. Is the Master Zach? And then it'll really tie in with Ephraim. But yeah, good episode. A lot of progress happened. Quite a bit of brutal action as well. It was, pretty overall, a lot of progress. Pretty good. I quite enjoyed it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thumbs up if you liked the video, thumbs down if you didn't, obviously. Leave me some feedback below. If you want to mention something I missed in the episode, or something you want to talk about in the episode, please leave me some comments below and I will respond to those. And subscribe for future content from myself going forward. I'm looking into the Exorcist TV show that's just recently come out. I really enjoyed that, so I'll try and put a video online very shortly. And until next time, cheerio.